So I was born and raised in a place in East London, near Ilford. So my growing up situation was much less like this, much like, yeah, you're right, how's it going? Yeah, well, go on. So at school, my school was like 95% ethnic minority. I grew up in grime, and that was my environment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that surprises some people now because I've had to clean up my language in order to be understood. But there's an element who wants to retract on that and go back to a bit more my childhood, the way I spoke, and champion that a bit more. But when I went to university, so I went to university in Bath, so it's the opposite situation where everybody there often came from much more privileged backgrounds than I did. And I never experienced racism. Nobody ever made me feel left out. But you start to internalize it yourself. You start to feel yourself, oh, I'm not quite fitting in. People don't understand my jokes, those kind of things.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was a bit of a struggle, just making sure that I was assimilating well. And in hindsight, it's such a good experience to have such a different schooling background to where I went to university, because now I can flip-flop a bit and I can work myself into different rooms.
Oh, the code switching muscle got switched on, and that's actually a good thing. Often when we talk about code switching, it's painted in a kind of negative context, I think, but it sounds like you see it more positively.
I think what the best thing about it is that you can understand and empathize with different people. So when people are so rigid in I'm like this and this is how I've got to be, then it's harder for you to then imagine what other people's lives are like. So yeah, some of the people I went to university with might have been more privileged than me, but they had their own issues, they had other things going on. And it's so easy to stereotype people. Whereas when you live with those people and you get to learn more about their childhoods and their upbringings and the struggles they face, you also get to know how to speak to them and how to persuade them. And it's a big gap at the moment, say, in the investment world, is that 70% of investors went to private schools and only 7% of the UK population went there. So you've got to understand how to speak to people like that if you want to succeed in that world. And if you have never grown up around those people, if you've never gone out with those people, it's harder for you. So even when I went to school, I used to go to karate, for example, and that's another type of background of people. And after university, I did loads of traveling, so I've been to about 50 countries. Going to all these different places, it enables me to see how other people react. And that's a good thing, I think, because then when you're explaining things, you can change your explanation, change the way you persuade people based on what's going to make sense for them. And you saw this with political, with Brexit, Trump, all those things, is that huge amounts of the population don't understand each other. And you can't persuade somebody you don't understand. You've got to see the world from their eyes and be able to then look at those stories and see how you can change it. So I think that switching between those two backgrounds really helps me to where I am today. New Year's resolution, new year, new me. So medium.com, for those of you who don't know, it's the biggest writing platform in the world for long form blogs. I started writing on there just as like a new challenge, right? I'd been reading a lot. I'd had my little quarter life crisis and I was reading a lot of books. And I was like, okay, as you read more and more, you start to pick up things you agree with and don't agree with. And this is what I always find funny about some people who read loads of books and they just agree with everything they read. So it's a no critical thinking that's going into it, right? If you're reading, and like anybody reading personal development now, you should be questioning what you're reading. You should be like, actually, that idea from this other book, I think that's a better fit for me. You've got to engage with it in that other way. Otherwise, you're just reading and not implementing, right? And that's what I want to do through writing. The idea through writing, I can explore these ideas that I'm having conflicts in from different things I'm reading from my own experiences and put them together. And that very first article went viral in January 2020. So that first article, over 100,000 people read it. That made me several £1,000s. And then all of a sudden, and people ask me, oh, how did you find your writing voice? And I don't know, and I just wrote something, right? It's like, that's the thing people forget. It's just, you can over sophisticate things, right? It's just go and do it and try it. And maybe you might have a natural knack for it. Maybe you've got something. And what happened for me then, so obviously the pandemic came into play in March of that year, which meant I had way more free time to write things in the evenings and the weekends. And I didn't actually have another hit for 5 months. So
when you say another hit, so you went 100,000 first article. Yeah. Next articles were what?
Like maximum, say 5,000.
Right.
But most of them would be 1,000-ish, right?
Okay.
But if you think about it in terms of the monetary aspect, none of the other articles maybe made more than £150.
Okay.
So on the first 20, 25 articles, let's say, the first article made me £3,000, and then none of the next 20 made me over 150. So that's roughly the way it was, right? So I could have very easily given up. I could have been like, oh, what's the point? Like, okay, I was just a one-hit wonder. So the bit that's actually the skill here, because the initial article was a fluke, right?
Okay.
But I kept learning, right? I kept engaging. I kept working, okay, how can I make my writing better? Or how can I do things in a different way? I joined Facebook groups. I was engaging in those. I was giving other people feedback. And what then happened is this massive purple period from, say, May of that year until the end of the year, where almost every other article I was writing was getting that hits.
Okay.
And
how often were you writing at this point?
So I'd say it was on average, say 4 to 6 articles a month. So I still had a day job, right? So I was still, and a lot of people play this numbers game, whereas I was a bit more intentional about it. I'd really edit things heavily. I'd be thinking about it. And by the time it came out, I just had a much higher hit rate than the average writer, because the average person would just write something and they're just putting out loads and loads of things to the world. And there's this element of, we talked, I think we mentioned this quite earlier, about the Einstein thing of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It's insanity. So each time I was taking a bit longer to do each iteration, but I was really thinking hard about, okay, how am I forming my words? How am I doing this? What's my tonation? Am I doing this in the correct way? Am I making this? So the variation of the words, is it short sentence and a longer sentence and a very longer sentence, to mix up that roller coaster of the reading? There was a lot of thought going behind it at this point. So the first article, I did none of that. I just wrote something and it worked. But after that, it became more and more where I knew what I was doing. And then it became the editor of the main entrepreneur's publication, the platform. And that also massively accelerated my growth, because I was now reviewing, say, a few hundred articles a week and picking the top 30 of them to publish. So when you're analyzing that incredible amount of volume, you get a lot better at understanding, okay, this introduction is really boring. Do I do that in my own articles? Yeah, I do. Crap. And then you edit it, right? So that was a way for me to learn very, very quickly about what's good and what's not. And so by the end of the year, then I started out earning my day job. And if you remember, this feels like such a long time ago now, but beginning of 2021, you're starting to think about, okay, there's going to be a return to the office soon. And everything I was doing, it made sense because I could work from home. I didn't have a social life. And I now started thinking about, okay, if I'm going to continue this, then something has to give here, right? So in the pandemic, I had the job and the side hustles. And I had no social life because you couldn't, so it was fine. But as things opened up, you've got 3 things here, and 2 of them I can keep and 1 of them I had to get rid of. And which one am I going to regret the most? And it was February of that year, so I took a week off, and I actually made a presentation of, here's my business plan, all this kind of crap, and presented it to my family. And this is the thing I'm very lucky about, is my dad just was like, I don't know why you did that for. Like, I think you should do it. I believe in you. Like, it'll work out. You'll figure it out, kind of thing. And for me, for somebody who went from that good school, good university, good grades, good consulting job, to my dad to be like, just don't worry about it. Just go and do it. It'll be fine. It was such a big boost, because I've been so scared about people thinking I'm an idiot, of like, I'm quitting my consulting job to become a writer, right? So I'm now in a world where that's not crazy. But from like all of my friends growing up, all the people who went to school, all the people who went to university, all the people I'd never worked with, that wasn't a thing that I'd ever seen somebody do. So for me, this is a massive identity shift. I remember the amount of anxiety I had in my notice period of like, have I done something stupid here? And that was a 3-month notice period. So that's a lot of time to agonize over your decision. And by the time I eventually quit, by the time I actually eventually left, then it was now that first year I gave myself to this experiment. And I did a lot of ghostwriting. I ghostwrote a book proposal for somebody. I think I wrote for like 100 startups. I wrote for senators. That was the main income source for that year. But that's where I started the first podcast in that year.
Okay.
And the reason behind the podcast, from the long roundabout way, is that once writing became my full-time thing, it was no longer a hobby. There was now pressure. So it's all great and well when you're making loads of money on the side, because you have your day job, you have a salary, it's all fine. Once you need to make money from writing, it removes some of the fun from it. So podcasting, the idea back in the day was that it's just something for fun on the side. It's a new skill to learn. You watch the initial episodes, they're terrible, right?
Yeah.
And you can see me kind of sweating through my top about how nervous I am as I'm doing it.
And when you say they were terrible, like what specifically wasn't good? Is it the questions? Is it the angles? Is it the, like, what about it do you think isn't up to snuff?
I would say it's my demeanor of me being nervous.
Okay.
And that comes across when you're listening to a podcast and the person sounds nervous as a host. you shouldn't be feeling like, oh, I hope they're okay, right? That's not what the feeling you should get from listening to a podcast.
Okay.
But, and this is the thing which everybody forgets, is that you've got to be willing to suck to get good at anything. And so many people aren't willing to suck. So don't come to me saying like, oh, I want to start a podcast and I want to do this. Like, go and do 10 episodes and suck and get over that first. Because you will never be good straight away. Okay, you could pay for a podcast coach. You could get that really in-depth help. But otherwise, you just got to let it go, and you just got to let go of the ego and just be willing to learn. And one thing I was quite lucky about is obviously because I already had the writing chops, a lot of my early guests were fairly major in terms of the amount of following they had, because I had access to these people, because they followed me, we were connected from my writing side. And again, the thing I say to so many people is, I think I said it to you and you're going to start this, is use your initial network first, who you're more comfortable with, who are going to be forgiving to your mistakes. Where so many people want to go for these big names at the beginning, why is that big name going to give you the time of day? And you want to be able to get good and learn your craft before you get those people on, so that you can make the most use of it, you can leave the best impression on those people. Whereas when it's people you're already mates with, it's going to help you so much because they're going to give you good feedback and then they're going to be on your side. And so that was the initial podcast, was called Mindful and Driven, and the idea was about, because a lot of my writing at that point was about how do you, I think you're going to like this as well, about how do you be ambitious and go for your goals while at the same time not burning yourself out. And a lot of my writing was about that too. So initial podcast about that. Then as I was the editor of Entrepreneur's Handbook, the guy behind that asked me to start a podcast there. And that's one where it really started to go to the next level, because that was, you had to have a minimum of 100 million valuations to come into that podcast, or 100K followers on Twitter or LinkedIn.
And how did you reach out to the guests for that? If the person who was running that was just starting a podcast, had you on as the host, how did you together get these guests on?
So because the platform itself, so Entrepreneur's Handbook, as a writing platform, was huge, right? So we had like 1 million plus reads per month.
Okay.
So if I'm going to email you being like, hey, I'd love to get you on the podcast, we're going to send it to our newsletter of 50,000 entrepreneurs. If you're a B2B SaaS company, like that's 50,000 potential clients you've got there, right? And again, it's like a lot of the people who are writing for us, they were quite big name entrepreneurs. So you get them on first. It's all about the easy steps. Like what people try and do is skip ahead. Like, use your easy steps first, build those blocks, build that foundation. So the big first guest was the founder of Netflix. And I think is the only person where you look at that video and you just see me just shaking because I'm so nervous to be.
Wow.
I just couldn't believe I got the chance to talk to somebody like that at this point in my life, right? And the thing about him afterwards, for an hour afterwards, he stayed on the call, like, tell me about you. I want to hear your story. So when somebody at that level, who's got as much influence as he has, can be nice to you and be kind to you, then that's formed the way I engage with everybody else afterwards. Because I didn't give a crap how big you think you are. If the founder of Netflix can be nice to me and just kind, and it just doesn't take much, right? Then everybody else can be as well. And that's the mentality I try to keep, right? You can say no to people, right? But you don't have to be cruel about it. You don't have to be unkind about it.
Yes, well, kindness is giving people what they need, not necessarily what they want. And what people never need is for you to be a dick, right? But people can receive no's or something that they don't want to hear in a kind way that gives them energy that is still pushing you in the right direction. And that does feel like a skill. It almost feels strange to say that kindness is a skill. We do live in a time which is very self-centered. And kindness can be challenging when you're making it all about you. And I'm wondering how much of these things you're describing you are now find yourself doing.
Oh yeah.
Right?
So
if you've and I want to hear about some of the the next biggest guests you brought on and things you learned from them, but it sounds like kindness is like a lesson number one here. Like you learn straight away what your biggest lesson was from guest number 1 out of 300 or whatever was to be kind, and here's how. How did you start applying that?
So I think one of the big things about, say, Mark Randolph, right, as the founder of Netflix, is that it took 4 months to get him on the podcast, right? So it's back and forth with his team. So he's set strong boundaries there. So when you are talking to them, he was very kind. But it doesn't mean we're besties. So it's that whole relationship between you can set boundaries, but when you're in a conversation with somebody and they're in front of you, be kind. And that's the balance a lot of people get wrong, right? Because it's, say, for example, you might have the same things. I have probably well over 1,000 people a month message me. I cannot spend all my time just replying to people.
Mm-hmm.
And often it's a case of those people might not have done the work, or they're not relevant, or whatever it is. So the way I manage it now is I've got autoresponders everywhere. So if you message me on LinkedIn, you're going to hit an autoresponder, and that tells you to join the community, and it tells you, okay, here's the next events coming up. Because what I can't do, and I've got to be kind to myself on that, is I can't be everybody's personal concierge. That's not the service I'm selling, and that's not a sustainable path for me at all. But what it means is that if somebody is in front of me and asks me for something, I can kindly say, okay, sorry, we don't do that. Or say, for example, a lot of people are like, I'd love to pick your brain about podcasting. And I say, okay, look, what I do at the moment is I have a blanket rule of I don't do that because of these different things. And I've helped those people in the past who then didn't continue podcasting. And that's just not a way that I can manage my time. But if you want to do coaching with me, cool, we can do that. But that's the way I can do it. I can say it in that kind of a tone.
Yes.
Rather than like, no, fuck off.
Yeah.
Right?
It's the setting a rule thing. Have you heard this? Like when people set it as a rule, people are much better at receiving it. We all grew up having rules placed on us, and we don't like it on one hand, but on the other hand, like it kind of worked. And
it's when it's fair, right? If it's you, if you feel like you're being singled out, it's just you that I'm not talking to, then you can take that very personally. If I say I just blanket do not do podcast, pick your brain things, it's different.
This is a rule I have put in place. It's nothing personal. It's that kind of objective tone. Yeah, I like this.
With the BHQ path, what I've taken is that I wanted to have more in-person engagement because I was getting lonely. And with a lot of these writers, who all the people I've named there, all American. So in this year, that first year after I worked for myself, pretty much all my clients were American, all the people I engage with were American, all 8 hours behind. So I'm getting emails in the evening. All my work is coming in the evenings. All my friends have day jobs. So in the daytime, when I'm less busy, nobody's around. In the evening, when people are doing stuff, I've got to do interviews. I've got to have calls with Americans. And that wasn't really the freedom that I hoped for when I quit my job.
Right, okay.
So my challenge now is how do I engage with the UK ecosystem, right? And like I said, I never heard of colour in tech. I never heard of any of these things, right? And from that perspective of somebody who had quite a big Silicon Valley network and New York network, but I literally had no idea about the UK. And like I felt like if I went to a UK event or London event, I'd feel like I was out of place and I wouldn't be able to be involved. And it was, you wouldn't go to stuff because, and maybe some people listening to this now feel that way. It's like, you're not going to go to an event because you're going to be the random odd person out and like the loser at the corner that nobody is like, oh yeah, right. And then other people were like, oh yeah, who's this rando, right? So one thing that happened is that, I think especially in my community, when I did try to start this out, so BHQ is British Asian entrepreneurs, right? And it's a community for high growth British Asian entrepreneurs, operators, and investors. But starting out is like, how do we, and the reason why we picked Asian initially is because we found this big problem with why aren't more people from my community helping each other? And like, we know there's great organizations for Black founders, great organizations for female founders, great organizations for LGBTQ founders, but Asians just seem to shit on each other and not help each other out. It's like, how do we change that mentality was the idea. And it came about because I gave a talk at EY and my co-founder's wife was like running that. And I basically said, like, I'd love to get more involved in the UK startup ecosystem, but I don't know anybody. Does anybody know anybody that can connect me with at the end, right? And she's like, oh, my husband works for a VC. So we had this chat, we basically this massive bitching, ranting session about how people don't help each other, everybody's shitting on each other with stuff. And I'm like, well, why don't we do something about it, right? And as well, I think all good ideas should come from that. You're really frustrated with the way things currently are, and you think you can try and do something better. And I had the media background and he had the investment background. So we had different skill sets, which was good too. So initially it was just going to be a podcast and we'd do the odd event every now and again. And the challenge that happened for me and the big switch in so much my philosophy and so much of the way I think is my dad passing away in August of that year. So like I said, my dad was the one who believed in me, has encouraged me to do what I'm doing. He's always the person who cared more about my happiness rather than my success. And he did so much like so many people in the community, and he was the one who came from nothing but himself to where he is. So I looked at it as like, now I'm in love with some level of power, right? How can I use that power in a way that is aligned with the integrity and the ethics and the person that I was raised to be, right? And that's what the BHQ has become. And there's been so many pivots and so many wrong turns and so many mistakes made along the way. And today, so we're 2 years in, so it's 200 episodes of the podcast, well over 2,000 people been to events. We've got, I think we talked to over 1,500 students as well. And we're doing pilot schemes with schools so we can get them into work experience. So the idea is that people from state schools, how do we get those people to be able to get work experience at a startup so that those schools are now open for them? Because when you apply to university, you have to put like your personal statement. If you come from a background where your daddy isn't a VC, how the fuck are you meant to get VC on your personal statement? How am I meant to show that I'm interested in this world or startup world? Because you've got no connections, right? And if we can do that for 100 kids this year, can we do it to 1,000 kids next year? Can we do it to 10,000 the year afterwards? But I think that's the way we can make a truly big difference.